Now entering the ring, Youngstown's very own Ray Boom Boom Mancini.
Hi, welcome to another round of the Boom Boom Room. I'm your host, Ray Mancini, here with my ace corner man, Mike Case. We have a very special guest today. We'll get to it. I'm getting to know him. I knew the name for a long time, but I've been away for a long time, and I just got back 4 years ago. I was in California for 30 years. Seems like yesterday. And but Mike, you know our guest.
He's the voice of Cleveland sports for the last 40 years. That's correct, wouldn't you say that's accurate?
Well, that's a very nice compliment.
Well, there you go.
Appreciate that.
There you go.
Love you, Mike.
Well, I said our guest is the inevitable Bruce Drennan, as Mike just said, voice of Cleveland sports. And we're going to get into the whole thing of how you, because you just told me you come from Chicago.
Yeah,
You're
born and raised
Chi-town.
in Chicago, Ray. Yeah.
Chicago, man.
Went to
Chi-town is
college
my
there,
town, my favorite city.
Yeah, I know you love Chicago.
I do.
You love Chicago. Yeah.
But
I've been here. I've been here in Cleveland since the spring. I came in the spring of 1978.
78. That was when now when you came here, not be honest with you, like we were hurting.
Sports-wise.
Sports-wise.
Well,
Sports-wise.
city-wise, right?
Well, are you? Well,
Yes, both.
Both, because they say Northeastern Ohio.
Right.
That's when the mill shut down here, September 19th of 1977. But it didn't just affect Youngstown; it affected the whole Northeastern Ohio.
Right.
It's the residual effect to Cleveland, Akron, Canton.
It's funny. I was hired to do an afternoon talk show on WBBG radio, and I'd never been to Cleveland before, so I was living, the first year in Cleveland, I was living downtown. And I got off the show, 7 o'clock, went home, changed clothes, got out, and wanted to go have a couple of cold ones, and I get outside, I'm in middle of downtown Cleveland. I thought I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It was I was the only human being left on the planet.
Dead
and I'm
town.
looking around, and whoa, and boy, has it changed now.
Yeah. Really very progressive city. I love downtown Cleveland.
Yeah.
I don't get to go as much as I like. But Bruce, tell us. Tell us a little bit about your journey and coming from Chicago. What brought you to Cleveland and all that good stuff.
Well, as sports, my father was a great athlete. He was a great football player, became a football official, ref, top varsity conferences in the Chicagoland area he worked, and I tagged along with him every Friday night, Saturday afternoon to the games, and so sports was my life. I played all the sports, and when I realized I wasn't going to be, and I went to Loyola Academy, which is like the equivalent of St. Ignatius in Cleveland. It's a Jesuit school, all boys at the time, tremendously tough academically, and great football powerhouse. And I didn't get good grades in high school because I didn't apply myself, and I regret that to this day. I really do.
Right.
But so I couldn't get into any big name college. I had to go to a junior college, and when I got out, I was working as a shipping clerk at Allstate Insurance, and I said, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. So I'd heard about Columbia College in downtown Cleveland, communication arts school, and I said, I've always had a gift for gab. I have this tremendous knowledge of sports. I said, the worst that they can say is no. So I enrolled, and it was quite expensive. And I said to my father, how am I going to afford this? And he said, well, I'll pay half if you pay half. I said, where am I going to get that kind of money? He said, why don't you become an official like me? Because his days were over. And so he led me in the right direction. I took all the tests, and I worked, and after only 2 years, I was getting varsity football and basketball games in the Chicagoland area. In a week, I'd work the men's leagues and the kids' leagues to pick up extra cash. And so I went to Columbia, and I majored in radio and TV, and I was very, very fortunate. I was taken under the wing by the chairman of the radio and television department. He's passed now. His name was Al Parker. And at the time, Al was making, $200,000-$300,000 a year, which in those days, translated today, it's $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, he taught for kicks. Getting one of his students into the business that he loved was a feather in his hat. And he worked for ABC, and he was a freelance commercial announcer. And he he invited me to come to ABC on a Sunday night when he was doing his shift. And we're in this booth, in this room, this tiny booth. He's at a desk. There's a monitor in front of him, a yellow light, a red light. And he's telling me, he said, "You have one of the most unique voices I've ever heard." He said, "You can't miss. You're going to be a star. They're going to love you or hate you." And I said, "Hate me? How can they hate me?" Little did I know that he was, he was a prophet. But he said, "That's okay. What would you rather have? Go into a bar room and say, 'Hey, what do you think of Drennan?' 'Who?'
Yeah, right.
Or 'What do you think of Drennan?' 'Oh, that son of a... Did you hear what he said the other day?'"
Bruce, that's a good job. I always tell people, one thing I learned about art, it's like artists will tell you, it's like actors or directors. Love it or hate it. But to have no thought about it, no emotion, is the worst for an artist. And the same thing as not, like you just said, hate me or love me, but at least have some type of thought process.
Absolutely right.
And
Absolutely.
And
So I'm in the booth, and he's giving me this confidence, and all of a sudden he said, the yellow light goes on, and he says, "Hold on just a minute." Then the red light goes on, and he says, "Channel 7, ABC, Chicago, you're watching Lawrence of Arabia." And it was going all over the country. And so I'm just, I'm in awe. Well, this great man got me over the fear of the microphone and the camera. And as you know, once you get over that, then you can realize whatever potential you do have. So I was able to get a couple of part-time jobs in radio while I was going to school. And we had deals with the Blackhawks, the Bears, the Cubs, the Sox, the Bulls to practice our play-by-play and color analysis. We had deals with all the teams. The school had a deal with the team. And so I met Harry Carey when he was doing the White Sox games, and he became a mentor of mine, which later on when I got the Indians job here in Cleveland, and he was still doing the White Sox. In those days, he was doing it with Jimmy Pearsall. And we'd always get together after the game. In those days, every media room had a bar. And I'd meet Harry after the game in the bar, and he drank scotch, and a lot of it. But so he was one of my mentors as well after Al. And I was working as a sports director for 3 years in Aurora, Illinois, after I graduated from school. And that's sort of like what Akron is to Cleveland or Youngstown. It's a city unto itself, but it's part of the market, the general market. And we were the voice of 7 different high schools. And we also there was a famous men's fast-pitch softball team in Aurora. And they played a 100-game schedule, and we broadcast all their games. They traveled all over the country. They took second in the nation in the Nationals 4 years in a row. So that gave me my experience in doing play-by-play in color for baseball, which later I got when I came to Cleveland. And I was there 3 years, and I saw a blind ad in Broadcast Magazine about a talk show host wanted, and I had no idea it was Cleveland. And so the program director flew to Chicago, came to the studio while I was doing my talk show in the afternoon, sat in the talk show, took me out to dinner that night, and I signed a contract, and that was the spring of '78.
When did he tell you where it was going to be? During the conversation?
Yes. When he came, I finally found it. He finally let it. And like I said, I had never been to Cleveland. And it's funny because all the years I've been here, I had opportunities to go elsewhere. I had an offer at KMOX in St. Louis. I had KTAR in Phoenix, WGN in Chicago to go back. And my big expression is, "I love you, Cleveland." And I literally mean it. I never wanted to leave.
Great city.
But did you think when you went, maybe this was just going to be the first stop into your career? Or did you think, I'm going to go there and I'll probably put down roots? And
no,
because at the time, it wasn't the most glamorous place.
No, you're absolutely right, Mike. I thought because I had been born and raised and went to college in an enormous city, I thought the only place for me was New York. That's the only place above. And so when I got the Indians job, the TV job with Joe Tate, and I went to New York, I said, "You can have New York. I don't want that lifestyle," because you got to live in Midtown.
That's right.
You got to live in Midtown, and it's mayhem. You know, you don't have a car because that's ridiculous to have a car in Midtown Manhattan. So I didn't want any part of New York. Nice place to visit, nice place to go to a Broadway musical, but no thanks as far as so No,
It's kind of funny. You said, when I turned pro, I moved to New York, 1979, and I lived midtown. Lived on 73rd between Columbus and I lived between Columbus and Central Park West, only because I was close to the 72nd Street entrance to get into the 72nd Street entrance to Central Park to do road work around the park and all the way up around the reservoir. And that's what the fighters did. My father used to run the reservoir, and again, I wanted to be my father, so I wanted to do everything he did. But all the fighters used to run the reservoir and around Central Park. So
I know that your father. I know this about you, Ray.
Yeah.
I know that your father not only was incredibly influential in your life, but also your career.
Oh, no, he was everything I wanted to be as a fighter. He's the number one contender in the world, 1942, 1944. During those days, to be number one contender in the world, you had to fight your way there, and he beat everybody. And he beat the number one contender in the world, Dave Castlew, from Montreal, in Montreal. He beat him in Montreal. So to beat, and Benny Leonard was the referee for that fight. That's just Benny Leonard, one of the greatest fighters of all time. So, anyhow, but that's what I said, and he told me at that time there was no L.A. or New York. Well,
Right.
To be as a fighter. But, you were talking about it's funny how you say it, but the major cities. Chi-Town in Chicago is a major, they said it's the second city, known as the second city, right? But it's actually, and now, as far as sports and entertainment, I was just telling you earlier, the Chicago Cineplex Studios is the biggest sound stages east of Hollywood. Chicago is becoming, what they've done, over $7 billion worth of entertainment over the last 7 years.
Sure.
Almost $1 billion. That's over $1 billion a year. That's
Right.
incredible how they've overtaken so much of the entertainment
Right.
value. So,
Right.
so I understand. But what I want to ask you, Mike, you said you were a high school referee,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people, you always L.A., New York, Chicago, L.A., the ball. At the guy, who's the guys like, say, basketball that was coming out during them years, the late 70s or early 70s, I should say, late 60s, that went on to play? Because so many good players.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was in Aurora as the sports director of that radio station, we were the first radio station in the state of Illinois to broadcast the Illinois high school basketball tournament. And like Ohio is a football state, the Chicago Public League is the best high school basketball conference in the country. I'll argue that with anybody. Cassie Russell, Terry Cummings. I mean,
Terry Cummings, right.
endless,
Right.
just endless. But when I was in Aurora, because of being the first station to do it, when the tournament would be conducted, they located the radio stations by seniority. So because we were the first, we were mid-court, right at the mid-court stripe opposite the scorer's table. We had the best location in the house. And I saw Isaiah Thomas.
I was going to ask you that.
When he was a junior at St. Joseph, which is a suburb, a Catholic high school suburb of Chicago. And when I saw him, and he was only a junior, I said, this guy is destined to be a star in the pros. And he grew. He was only 6', or 6'1" at the time, and he eventually became 6'3". But he was up against, he led his team to the state championship, and they were up against a great team, an undefeated team, and they got beat. But you could just tell at that time Isaiah Thomas was destined. And then, of course, he went to Indiana, played for Bobby Knight, won the national championship, and then on to the pros with a great career in Detroit. But, there were so many of them, especially out of the Chicagoland area. Basketball, it's just incredibly enriched with talent.
I didn't realize Terry Cummings was there. Terry Cummings was a terrific for the Milwaukee Bucks for years.
Absolutely.
I told a story.
Kevin Garnett came from the Chicago Public League.
Of course, he was a Chi-Town guy.
Yeah, Dwayne Wade.
What is it? Farragut?
Farragut High School. Simeon, Derrick Rose went to Simeon.
D. Rose, that's right.
And Simeon's a national powerhouse, and in those days,
D-Wade.
King High School at one time was a powerhouse. Phillips High School at one time was an incredible powerhouse. Again, the Chicago Public League was, I mean, it was just incredible. And when I was in college, one of my fellow students went to Von Steuben, a Chicago Public League school. And so we'd practice our play-by-play, and we did the tournament. And we'd do the Chicago Public League playoffs at the Chicago Amphitheater. You might have fought there.
No,
There were
not
a lot of
there.
old fights there.
I tell you what, at that time, you're right. It was Chicago's always been a great town. Amphitheater, and of course, they did Chicago Stadium back, 30s and 40s, of course.
Yeah.
But then now, they brought it out to Rosemont
Yeah.
Theater, late 70s,
Yeah.
early 80s.
Right.
They had Rosemont. But then when I fought there in 1981. I fought at the Hilton downtown on Michigan Avenue.
Oh,
The
okay.
Conrad Hilton.
Yeah.
Well, it was a fight. It was my first ESPN fight. My second television. Fought the month before in New York on USA TV, but USA wasn't national at the time. It was all regional. So I fought in New York, basically in that area. But then the following month, I was on ESPN, and we fought the Conrad Hilton, and it was me. It was tie-in night. They said night of the tie-ins. It was me. I was the semifinal, and then Vito Antuofermo was the main event.
That's pretty Italian.
Yeah, Vito Antuofermo was the main event, and I won a fight, and then I won 10 rounds over a guy named Al Ford from Canada, from Toronto. Al Ford was a contender, was the right opponent, the right guy. Tommy was on the way down, I was on the way up, but he carried me. Didn't carry me. He took me 10 rounds, I should say. I dropped him in the fourth round. I said, I got him. He got up. Them old guys slick. They move. They know how to move your clutch, grab. They pull you. That was the greatest education I got. I love Al Ford. I've seen Al since then. We were Facebook buddies. He's a wonderful guy. But I love Al Ford forever because I got more out of that 10-round fight than anybody because it was an education.
Right.
And then the following month from that was April. May 16th was my first CBS televised fight when I fought for the North American Lightweight Championship. But, every fight leads you to the next fight, right? But
Right.
that was Chicago Hill. That was the only time I got to fight there. But, the great fights there for years.
Oh.
My father
the
fought there.
Liston Cassius Clay fight was there.
No. The first one was down in Florida. The second fight was in
Well, then I'm thinking of Floyd Patterson.
Floyd Patterson fought there, yes. And
When he lost to Liston?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You're
Okay.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Right.
But the biggest fight that one remembers is the third Zell Graziano. Was at Chicago Stadium when
okay.
Graziano, they 1-1, and then
Yeah.
Graziano knocked him out in the third round. But it was one of the greatest knockouts of all time. So everyone
Yeah.
remembers that fight.
Yeah.
And Jack Dempsey and you can correct me. I think the Dempsey Tunney. It was the first. I think it was
okay.
the long count. I think might have been Chicago Stadium.
Where did Lewis fight Schmeling? They had two fights.
Right, New York. The second fight was at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
When he knocked him out in the first round.
Right.
The first fight might have been in New York at the Garden, or it might have been Chicago.
I had a guy
might have
call
been
me
Chicago,
on the show.
might have been Chicago.
I was telling you before we came on the air here. I had a guy call me last week about boxing, and we talked about it, and we can do that so again here. But I had referred to the Lewis Schmeling fights, and millennials have no clue
Right.
how historic that was,
Yes.
because Schmeling was promoted by Hitler and
Right.
Goebbels as used as a tool,
Yes,
a
and he-
propaganda tool,
and he hated that.
and he hated it.
He hated it.
He hated the Nazis.
Yes, he did.
And he won the title, of course, over Lewis. And then the second fight, as you referred, he got knocked out in the first round. But when the war broke out, he wanted nothing to do with the Nazis, and they forced him to be a soldier against his will.
Yes.
And a lot people don't realize how historic a time that was in boxing because of the Lewis Schmeling two fights.
And what people don't realize is that Max Schmeling later on became very wealthy
Oh, I
businessman.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
How do you make his money?
I think the Coke distributorship in Germany.
Germany?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Very wealthy.
Uh-huh.
When Joe Louis was hitting hard times, Max was sending him money.
No kidding.
Max took care of him for years.
Oh my
for
goodness!
years,
What
Max.
a great
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
That's really a great
That's
story.
true story. That's true story. Max Smelling,
Oh.
he loved Joe Louis, and when they fought, and when Joe Louis beat him the second time, and Max Smelling hated the fact, like you said, that the Nazi propaganda was using him.
Right.
And and then when like I said, they had two great. The first time it was the first loss Joe Louis had.
Right.
Was the Max Schmeling, and Schmeling
Shocked the world.
Yes, and stopped him in round 12 with the right hand. Right, Joe Louis is a great fighter. Every fighter has a weakness. Joe Louis, if you watch Joe Louis tapes, but you can't. He was such one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Yes.
Top 3 heavyweights of all time.
Yes.
But Joe Louis he threw that jab. He actually threw that, dropped his left jab. He threw it. It was a classic. And Schmeling watched that. They seen, and so Schmeling threw that right hand over the top and dropped Joe in the 12th round, and then wanted to throw it again, stopped him in the 12th round.
Right.
But that was actually, he didn't beat Joe for the title. That was before Joe fought. Joe had the title. That was before, because Joe was undefeated, and then Joe wound up beating Jimmy Braddock for the title.
Oh, Braddock.
And then Jimmy
They
Braddock
did the movie about
right,
Braddock with
exactly.
Russell Crowe.
Cinderella Man.
And Renee
Right.
Zellweger.
But-
I thought,
but-
it was a
but-
tremendous movie.
Yeah.
and then
2005, I think.
Right.
Schmeling was in that.
but Schmeling actually had lost the title before that. And I was Braddock to beat him. Braddock decision. No, Braddock. I'm sorry, decision. Max Baer. Max Baer had beat Schmeling.
Max Baer.
Beat Schmeling.
Right.
Beat Schmeling. Braddock beat Max Baer. And then Joe Louis beat Braddock. So they had the rematch, because when him and Schmeling fought, there was, like I said, it was for Schmeling title at the time. But now Joe had the title, and that's when
I got to ask you a question
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
Liston Clay fight.
Yeah.
It was before Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali, of course. The mythical punch that Liston did not come out of the corner. What did
Phantom-
you think?
the Phantom
the,
punch?
the Phantom punch.
Well, that was the second fight. The second fight, there's two punches. There's two stories. The first one is when he didn't come out of the corner for the seventh round or something. That was the first fight when Ali was going to quit. He actually was going. Angelo had to push him off his stool. That's a true story. Ali was come back. Couldn't see. I can't see, because they felt that something got in his eye. He thought it was maybe some Vaseline or something. Angelo had to literally shove him off to get him go out for the next round. So now, whatever, it was the sixth round, or I think it was the seventh round, they said if Liston would have got up to come out, Ollie wasn't. But when they saw that they stopped the fight, Liston wasn't coming out, Ollie won the title. But Ollie has as much to thank Angelo Dundee for anybody for keeping him win the title, because he wanted to quit because he could see, but Angelo actually pushed him out to make him go out. And then the second fight, that was
a Phantom punch.
Phantom punch.
I interviewed Angelo Dundee years ago when I was doing morning drive at WKNR radio, and he told me that Ali trained. What made him the greatest was that he trained by far harder than any other fighter he ever had contact with.
Well, that's a hell of a statement. Ali was always known for being in shape. I'm not Angelo. I was very good friends with Angelo. I loved Angelo to this day, and he would know he had trainer of Ali, and even though Ali was with the Muslims, see, people didn't know. I didn't realize this till I just read the book Ali by Jonathan Eig, E-I-G, which is probably the foremost boxing biography about Ali of all the books out there, 500 pages, but it demyths that word
Debunked.
Demystifies all the Ali legend, in the sense that all of the all the Ali things people didn't know about, which I didn't know about. He demystifies Ali in a lot of ways. All his family was threatened to sue him and stuff, but they couldn't, because Jonathan Eig did his homework, and the book's been out there. It's spectacular. If you're an Ali fan, 500 pages, man. But it was like, hey, look, Ali's still the greatest for me, the greatest heavyweight, and I got to be good friends with him, Muhammad, and probably he's one man bigger than the sport. But a lot of things that I was like, wow, I did not know. And Ali was handled by the Muslims when he came out of the amateurs. Everyone thought it was later in his career. When he came out of the amateurs, they would have, when he was still an amateur at the Olympics, they were on top of him and talking to him. So he, shortly after that, is when he became a Muslim. He was still Ali early in his career. But shortly after that, he changed.
You mean Clay?
I'm
Clay,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Cassius Clay, right. And his mother and father hated that he changed his name. They hated it.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. His father and mother
did not
hated
know
the
that.
Muslims. His father, and they were, very much against it. They loved their son, though, of course. So it was a lot of
Yeah,
things.
he
that
won.
book.
He won the gold medal. Who was the Cuban fighter that was so good in the heavyweight division?
Teofilo Stevenson.
Yes, and I would have loved to have seen him fight Ali.
You know, it's funny because people are always talking about Teofilo Stevenson and Ali, even after Ali was the heavyweight champ of the world. And I was in Cuba a couple of years ago, and I talked to a guy who was on the amateur team with Teofilo Stevenson, and he said to me, "What do you think about?" I said, "You're kidding me, right? You're joking." I said, "Forget Ali. Joe Frazier would have chewed him up, put him in his back pocket, used him for change. Forget Joe Frazier. Jerry Corey would have put his back pocket, used him for change.
Why do you say that, Ray?
He's a guy who won 3 rounds, amateur. These are pros that go 10 rounds.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You can't. You know what it's like?
But don't you think he was talented enough to train
We don't
for
know.
going more rounds?
We don't know because he never had to. He was such an amateur pro. That's what I tell people. You know what it is? You know, it's like the guys from the high school in Chicago going to the pros, going right for. Very few could do it. Very few. Kevin Garnett was the first one. How many years? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, but he'll be first year. They're gonna win that high school. The team that won the state title, they're gonna win the professional title.
Yeah. Right.
I don't care how good they are.
Well,
Are
that's
you
an
kidding me?
interesting point.
Well,
I
these
still
guys-
would have liked to have seen it though.
Well, they talked about it for a long time, and the Cuban government put the kibosh to it because they knew it was a joke. They knew they couldn't beat Ali. They knew it was just trying to get the publicity for Stevenson.
Yeah.
You know, what if he turned pro? What if this one? Stevenson was a big, strong guy, amateur. You know, but he got beaten in amateurs too. He wasn't undefeated in the amateurs. Dwayne DeBobic beat him in the Pan Am Games.
Yes,
the
I
year
remember
before,
that.
The year before the 1972 Olympics, and then he got knocked out.
I do
by him.
remember that,
So what I'm
yeah.
saying is, you can't compare amateurs to pros.
Now, why
You
don't
can't.
they? You know, the Olympics now.
Oh, they're terrible. Our
Ray,
amateur team's
You know,
terrible.
when Cosell was alive, we would get tremendous coverage
That's right.
of
Right.
boxing in
That's
the
right.
Olympics. Tremendous coverage.
Well,
Now we don't get
I
any.
didn't see any fights last year.
Yeah.
When it was on last time. I didn't see any boxing.
Right.
Prime time Olympics at all.
Yeah.
Because now they put on some cable networks because the Olympics they had the network and then the network
they'll have-
affiliates of the cable.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's our I've said this over and over. I'm gonna say our amateur program is horse crap, absolute horse crap. Our amateur program, and because people have been saying that, and we're not relevant at all anymore. To change the format now in our amateurs from to a 10-round, 10-9, like pro style. They changed it to the pro format, scoring wise.
Yeah.
10-round, 10-9 round. They had to, because our guys when they changed amateurs turned pro couldn't make the transition.
You know, back then,
Very few could. Very few, I should say.
U.S. always had a strong boxing team. Obviously, Cuba had a tremendous
And the
boxing.
Soviet
Union. Even Poland had
Polish
some good.
and Romania too.
Yeah.
The Eastern
Yeah.
Bloc countries. Eastern Bloc
Yes.
countries. Serbia. Was that?
Yes.
So but,
Once in a while, you'd get
Well,
a
that's
Brit in
Yugoslavia,
there too.
Yugoslavia.
Once in a while, you'd get a Brit.
But no, I mean it's terrible,
Yeah,
absolute
it
horse
is.
crap. I mean, it's the countries they say, well, we know that so and so won, but we don't want to be the one that voted against them. So because everyone else is going to vote for the guy, and that's how Roy Jones got beat. Everyone knew. They said, well, we knew he won,
And-
but we
and-
just didn't want to vote against the
And
hot.
let me bounce this off of you. Do you question? I question the judging.
Oh no, there is
We
no.
talk about it all the time.
That's what I'm saying.
All the time we talk about it.
In pro game or the amateur.
No, the amateurs.
Oh no, that's what I was just saying. When Roy Jones lost in Korea to the Korean, everyone said we knew he won. Everyone knew. We didn't want to offend the home crowd, the home city, the host city. So they said we all knew he won. So what the 3 of them thought that way. Why he lost 3-2? No, everyone knew he won.
And that's wrong.
And of
that's
course
what's
it
wrong with
was.
the sport.
Mike, and that's why they gave him the most outstanding fighter, even though he lost, because everyone knew he won.
Well, anything, boxing, gymnastics, figure skating,
Any judging.
any of that judging when you get, and especially when the Soviet Union was still intact,
right.
because then all the Eastern Bloc countries would have their judges, and it would be very tainted, very tainted.
Well, how about that new documentary that came out on Netflix? If anybody watches it, called Icarus. Icarus is about the blood doping, and it's about the guy who was in the Russian doctor who flipped, and he ratted out and said, we've been doping forever, for years. Everyone, our whole
Shocker.
been doping since the 70s.
Yeah.
Since the 70s.
Well, remember the East German women, the swimmers?
Yes.
Remember them?
Yes.
Sure.
So that, and he said Putin didn't. He made them dope, and he said, of course everyone knew that. But Putin, they were trying to, and then they masked it some way. So when they went to international competition, but he said we've been doping since the 70s. So so what they did is, they had to get the guy out of the country. So he came here to America, and he's under a different name. He's actually in witness protection because Putin put out the hit on him. That's true. No, you watch. If anybody's on Netflix, check out the documentary Icarus. 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 It's about this whole thing about the blood doping in, foreign countries, but about Russian doping.
Hey, since you brought him up, Cosell fan, yes or no?
I was a fan of his. I was a fan of his because
I'm a broadcasting geek.
Yeah,
I like to
but
talk
I never
about
met
sports
him. Mike, the funny thing, he was alive when I was the one guy I didn't meet. I met a son. I've met a son. But here's the thing. Howard was not well liked. Not well liked, as you think. And I have tapes. I used to watch the tapes of some of my opponents. And I'm watching tapes of some fights. And like when I fought Alex Arguello, he was on the undercard of one of these fights, all the fights on Wild World of Sports. And they have all the fights, and I have Cosell between rounds. What? Don't you talk to me like that, young man. I'm the greatest sports announcer that's ever lived. Don't you ever talk to me. Do you know who you're talking to? I am the greatest sports announcer ever lived. Don't you ever talk to
You could argue that.
Oh, no, but this is off. These are the studio tapes that we watch.
In between
oh my
breaks
God.
and stuff.
Oh, you got to hear this stuff. It's unbelievable.
What about you?
I'm very
Unbelievable.
disappointed to hear that, Ray, because I looked upon him as a genius. I think he was one of the most incredible, as far as play-by-play national now, Kurt Gowdy. Mm-hmm. He did the World Series every year. He did the Super Bowl every year. He did the NCAA basketball championship every year. And then Cosell, of course, with the boxing and his relationship with Ali. But don't tell me otherwise that there are two factors that made Monday Night Football the institution that it was for decades. It's diminished now because now there's Thursday Night Football, there's Sunday Night Football, there's there's football. But Monday Night Football was a must-see in this country by even people with a casual interest in the sport. And the reason was, there's two reasons. One was illegal gambling. And because why should anybody in Cleveland care about a game between, the 49ers and the Jets? Right. I mean, so illegal gambling and Howard Cosell.
No dispute.
No
dispute
question about it.
No.
So why was he so good, you think? Because he wasn't an athlete, obviously.
You know what? He was a tremendous showman.
Yes, that's the key word. Showman. He was. Yes,
he knew. He would intentionally instigate something with Meredith, and he was all for show, entertainment. He knew when those lights went on. And I actually pandered myself a portion of my career. When those lights go on, you're on the air.
That's right.
Yeah, you got to be that guy.
You got to perform. And he was a great performer.
Yeah, he was. There's no, Bruce, there's no dispute that he made a lot of athletes. And all he talks about it in that book, his relationship with Howard Cosell, and how Cosell made him, but Ollie made Cosell also. Because they've known him, because of the fights and
he was
interviews.
The first portion of his life, he wasn't in sportscasting at all.
Right.
He was a lawyer.
Right.
Why did I know
that? Yes, and he wasn't. It wasn't until well into his life that he was hired by ABC to initiate a Monday Night Football, and then become involved in Wide World of Sports, and then of course his love was boxing and the whole thing with Ali.
Oh, that thing, the other one was, I watched the tape. It was during the time that Vino Antifermo fought Hugo Cora, and Hugo Cora for the middleweight title. And it was over in they fought in Rimini, I believe, Rimini, Italy. And Marvin Hagler was on the undercard. And he says, and they were because Hagler was supposed to fight the winner, right? And so, and Cosell's talking about, They said, Howard, we want you to interview Marvin Hagler. I'm not going to interview nobody. Who's Marvin Hagler? He's a nobody. Why is he talking to me? Who would I? And he's going, why would I be talking to him? Well, okay. Don't give me anybody. I want somebody with some name value. He's got nothing, going on. Well, the Vugo Core Vito and Inferno fight's like watching paint dry. I mean, it was boring. Now, Vito won the world title. Yeah, hustled Core. But so about 6 I'm trying to. You hear it goes out. Give me that. Get Marvin Hagler. Give me him, Marvin Hagler at ringside. So Marvin comes over in between rounds. Marvin Hagler, he said, "You are America's next champion. You are the greatest middleweight I've seen. You put on a show today, and you said,
And that was what Cosell was doing. He was putting on a show.
But you could hear this. But I'm actually listening to the tapes from that. Oh man, and
So funny.
But that's the stuff I love to hear about is the backroom stuff.
Yeah.
No. Here's another gentleman from Cleveland area. I know he interviewed me years ago. I'm not Cleveland. I'm sorry. Well, there was Jimmy from New York. I met Arthur Rush Jr. Did you remember Art Rush Jr.?
No.
Art Rush Jr. was around forever, and Art Rush Jr. is two things you could not argue with him on. And he was that guy who said, "Don't you ever argue with me. Don't with your sports before you ever talk to me in my case. Don't you ever call me and insult my intelligence again with this question." Was baseball and boxing. Art Rush Jr. was. So when you see Stephen A. Smith now, he's Arthur Rush light.
Yeah.
And I tell him that too. Stephen A. Smith is Arthur Rush Jr. light. Because Art Rush Jr. but Art Rush Jr. knew his stuff, and he was great. He was on for years and years in New York. And what was the guy from Cleveland that was just another one that was bombastic and but he knew his sports?
Pete Franklin?
Pete Franklin, that's right. That's right.
Well, I was hired to replace Pete Franklin. I was brought to Cleveland
when he
to
went to New
counter
York?
Pete Franklin. No, when he went to New York, I was hired to replace him. But I was originally brought to Cleveland by Tommy Ambrasia and Joey Restafo, who I referred to earlier as the program director that flew to Chicago. And they were working for Nick Milletti, who owned 3WE.
Oh, sure. Oh,
he owned 3WE, and they made Pete Franklin a star. And then Milletti sold the station, and Ambrasia and Restafo branched off and bought their own property, and they were going to do a talk show format on the AM. The only problem was we were a 5,000 water compared to the 50,000 clear that 3WE was. So they went on a nationwide search to get a talk show host. That's where I came into the picture. They hired me. And then years later, Tommy, with his partners, bought 3WE. And that was when Franklin left to go to New York, and they hired me to, and I didn't even apply for the job. I didn't even apply for the job, but they sought me out and hired me to replace Franklin.
Bruce, did you say Nick Milletti correct me if I'm wrong, man, you know this, but I don't know.
The answer is yes.
Was he the first owner of the Richfield Coliseum?
And the
Yes,
Cavs.
yes.
And the Cavs.
Yes.
Boom.
And
I-
the
I
Cavs.
was-
That's right.
His vision,
Oh, and the
Ray,
Cavs. That's right. That's
Right.
right.
his vision
He
was
thought
to
those two communities,
Yes.
it would grow between
Yes,
Cleveland and Akron.
exactly, Mike.
And it never really did.
Right.
He had that place in the
You
middle.
knew what I was
Right.
going to ask. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
right. No, you're exactly right.
And you are a
I know, I'm
suit man. You're
thinking-
visual.
I'm thinking
Man, you
what
got
you're
me.
thinking.
And you know what? Every time I drive by there where the Coliseum was now, there's an eerie feeling that comes over me because it's just barren prairie now.
Right, right.
And, I remember it so vividly.
I was just thinking yesterday about this because when you would go to a Cavs game, and I was thinking about Joe Tate because my favorite parts about listening to Joe Tate was after the Cavs game, you had to run to your car because everyone went out the same entrance.
That's right.
So good luck with 18,000 people, and you'd sit in your car and you listen to the postgame show, and you'd listen to Hot Rod 5 out of 5 from the line, but that whole thing, and then he'd do the commercials and stuff. But that Coliseum was just so poorly put in the worst place in the world because
Yes.
everybody had to leave through the same place, and you never get out. You would
Yeah.
you would just sit there and listen and try to finagle a way out of there. It was just so awful.
Yeah, it
and now
was.
it's just a barren field, and it makes me a little
Yeah.
bit sad because if you lived in Akron, like we grew up in Akron, you didn't have to drive to Cleveland to go see the Cavs or go see
Sure.
Ice Capades or a boxing match or whatever
Well,
it was.
when I first
It was
came
nice.
to Cleveland, and Bill Fitch was the coach of the Cavs, and he was. I remember like it was yesterday. I walked into his office after a game, and it was a loss. And I introduced myself to him, and he was just as gracious and friendly and welcoming as could be. And I established a very nice rapport with Bill, and had tremendous respect for him all these years after.
Is he in the Hall of Fame? He should be in the Hall of Fame.
If he isn't, he should be, yeah.
For sure.
What year was Ollie Wepner at the Coliseum?
That was at the Coliseum,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What was that? Was that 78, 79?
I was thinking it was, I almost said 80, so it must have been
No,
before that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Crazy.
before that.
Yeah. I was,
It was before I came to
Before you
Cleveland.
got to, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. Okay.
We're coming up on the anniversary of the perfect game.
Yeah.
The last time for the Cleveland Indians they had anybody throw a perfect game, and you got to do the game. What was it, a rainy Friday night? I want to say
Yeah,
in
it
May.
was cold and rain,
like 40
misty
degrees.
and terrible,
And
and
everybody
there was
says they
only
were
like
there.
7,000 people there.
was on
if
TV.
That, and yeah, we televised it on Channel 43.
7,000, if that.
Yeah,
If
but
that,
everybody says they
and
were there.
Yet there's probably hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of people
Yeah,
that
yeah,
say they
yeah.
were there
Or
Ray.
watched it.
But yeah, it was a very cold night. And here's an interesting story about the perfect game. In those days, I would use a scorebook that had pages, and I have it framed in my office at my home, and the bottom of the 8th inning is blank, and the top of the 9th inning is blank.
Oh, I know why.
And the reason is because the director, after the top of the 8th inning, said, "All right, Bruce, we want you down in the Indians' dugout. If Lenny gets the perfect game, get out there and get an interview with him."
Mm-hmm.
Now, in those days, there were no wireless mics, so they were stringing together all these cords, and so it easily could have been sabotaged. But so I went down and I got Lenny first, and another parts of the story. In those days, they had those gaudy, awkward cassette recorders, and some guy put a cassette. I'm interviewing Lenny right after the perfect game. And some guy put a cassette recorder right in there, and I gave him an NBA elbow that the pros would have envied. But yeah, so I knew it would be a talking piece with my scorebook, so I kept it blank, and it's in my office in my home today.
How awesome was that? That's the last time.
Yeah, for
Isn't that crazy?
Cleveland. Yeah, for Cleveland. Yeah.
Thanks to that bad call.
And Lenny is here's a couple of things about Lenny's perfect game. He didn't strike out anybody until the 4th inning.
Huh.
And in the last 4 innings, I think it was the last 4 innings, he had such a devastating curveball that night. He said to himself, "They can't touch it so far. I'm going to make them prove that they can touch it." And that's all he threw the rest of the game.
I'm glad you said that because a lot of people probably think that Toronto had just started in 76
Right.
or something like that.
78,
Yeah.
78.
And it was rainy, it was May, it was, maybe they didn't want to be there. I'm glad you said that he was that good.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that Toronto wasn't just mailing it
yeah.
in.
Oh, yeah. Luis Leal, Alfredo Griffin were on that team. Toby Harrah made an unbelievable catch in foul territory, reaching into the stands on the third base side, that who knows what would have happened. Kuiper made a great play in that game, too. But there's always something in a no-hitter or a perfect game. There's always a play that could have gone the other way.
Right.
One of your biggest thrills?
No question. No question. The other was being chosen by the White House to MC the rally for President Reagan in '88 when he was leaving office, but he was touring the country campaigning for George Bush Sr.
How'd you get that?
You know what? Through, it's ironic, through friends of my wife's family who were Democrats.
Huh.
How about that story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just fell together.
Yeah, and it was that was a real thrill. I got to meet the president, and here's an interesting story about that. He walks in, and by the way, I'm on stage, so I'm revving up the crowd, and Secret Service, and you could tell when Reagan arrived because all of a sudden the Secret Service tripled, and the one Secret Service guy came right below me, came on, and he gives me one of these nods, get off, So, because nobody introduces the president, they have that tape recording. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of the
Then the
United
song.
States. Yeah. And then, so I walk off, and here I see this young kid dressed in a beautiful suit, young kid. I mean, he wasn't 30 years old. He was not 30 years old. And he's escorting Reagan to the steps to go up to the stage. And then when it's all over, he's right there to greet Reagan to escort him off the stage. I said, who the heck is that guy? And I was told that Reagan surrounded himself with young intellects so he could stay contemporary.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
How about that? Now, when you were on there, were you your Drennan, or were you
Yes,
were you
I
different?
Was. No, I was
Bombastic,
myself.
huh?
Yeah,
Right, Greg.
because that's a fine line. You don't want to steal a show from the
Well,
president,
but it's an
you know?
enthusiastic crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're there.
You got to get it going.
Yeah, they're there to cheer, and it was an enthusiastic. It was an easy crowd. I mean, one of the hardest crowds I've ever dealt with was I did a speaking engagement for a police convention, and there must have been 500 cops there, and man, oh man, I was trying everything in my arsenal to get them going, and they were just
Nothing. Stoic. Hey, speaking of the
That
cops,
was pretty brutal.
I hate bringing this up, but you said I could ask you anything. Your show's called All Bets Are Off.
Well, it used to be.
Or was, yeah, for a reason. Tell me about the gambling and the getting pinched and getting in trouble and having to go to prison, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's an open book.
I did not know the story, so
Yeah,
please,
see, this will be new for you.
Yeah, well, on the
What?
side.
How much were you gambling?
You mean money-wise or how often?
Okay, both.
A lot and a lot. Every day and a lot. Thousands every day.
What were you
And,
the best at?
Most people that bet with illegal bookmakers brag and say, oh, yeah, I got him for this, and they're lying. Illegal bookmakers would not be in business if they were losing.
Uh-huh.
I was the exception to the rule, and I made a ton of money on the side. Well, one day I was calling, and little did I know that one of the bookmakers' phones was tapped.
Jesus.
And
Just from your house, you're calling?
I was calling from my house, and little did I know that it was tapped, and then I didn't find out until much later. The reason that the feds had tapped his phone was not because of the bookmaking, but he was dealing drugs on the side.
Oh, lovely.
So I had no idea about that.
Mm-hmm.
But when they heard me, they said, well, whoa, my voice is, kind of
Pretty
recognizable.
distinctive.
So it wasn't your name, it was the
So
voice.
it was the voice. Said, well, isn't that something? Look what we have here. So I'll never forget, it was a Sunday in September of '04, and knock on the door, and it was the FBI, and it was I was doing the calls, and
So it's before the game
Browns
started.
were playing the New York Giants. I'll never forget, and so there were 8 or 9 FBI and IRS agents that came into my home, and they thought I was a bookmaker, and they sat me down at the dining room table, and they couldn't have been nicer. One of them said, this is very difficult for me, Bruce. I've been a fan of yours for years.
Oh, God.
Here I am, getting raided by the
Yeah.
FBI, and this
In
guy
your
is saying
pajamas.
how much is he's admired my work, They did not tear up the house at all. They could not have been nicer and more courteous to my wife, and it was just unbelievable. But they did think that I was a bookmaker. Well, I hired a fantastic criminal federal specialist attorney. His name's Albert Giuliani. And since we have become best of friends. And he the worst part was the investigation. I was never arrested. I was never cuffed. The worst part was the investigation. And I thought, I knew my career was over. I thought my life was over. I became a recluse. If it wasn't for my wife, I don't know what I would have done. She always had faith we'd come through it. And so that year and a half of investigation was the worst time of my life.
That's how long it took?
The investigation. Let me tell you something. The feds, I learned so much. They take their time. They don't rush to they dot all the I's and cross every single T. It's very if you go to court against the federal government, if you go to trial, you lose 85% of the time, and if you appeal, you less than 1% win.
Well, Bruce, I was going to say, I've had friends and most people in Youngstown. There's a lot of guys that, unfortunately, the feds will bleed you out. Because that's what the RICO Act changed the game, So instead of putting all the case together, they'll bleed you out one at a time. So eventually you got to cop a plea because they'll bleed you out.
Well, I had a couple of different bookmakers right here in Youngstown. That
Yeah,
I
of
dealt
course.
with.
No, look, but see, that's the thing. It's as they say, a harmless vice around here. Everyone
Well,
knows
now
it.
it's going to be, as you know, it's becoming
legal.
Legal.
Yeah, they have to. It's going to kill the book.
It will. Well, it will and it won't. They may stay in business if they adjust the line. They may have to. They may have to teeter with the line, and then they could stay in business illegally. But when the investigation was over, my lawyer Albert came to me and he said, "Look, they wanted to put you away they wanted to fine you $350,000 and put you away for 3 years." And he said, "I have now convinced them that you're not a bookmaker, you're just a real smart player. And instead of the 3 years, I can get you 5 months, and instead of the $350,000, your fine will be $3,000." And I said, "Where do I sign?"
Wait, so your problem is you were doing too well, and it made it look like you were a bookmaker?
Yeah, they thought that I was.
Or maybe just heard your voice on the phone a lot. That's probably
Well,
more like it. Look, that's usually, I have friends of mine, if they're on the phone, if you're on that phone a lot, that's what raises their suspicion.
Did you have some inside info? I mean, why were you winning so much?
No,
smart.
You're just that good at it.
Yeah.
Because you're good, you know sports.
Yes, exactly right.
I mean, especially baseball. I don't know if you bet baseball or not. Baseball's about the pitcher, right?
Yes.
You bet on the pitcher.
Yes.
What he's doing and stuff. And that's obviously, and that's what a lot of guys do,
Right.
friends of mine.
So,
So you signed up for that.
yeah, I signed up for that, and it was, and after that, we did a press conference. After my plea bargain, we did a press conference, and then it became, because I was front page news, top story on the TV stations, and just the worst time of my life. Well, then public sentiment changed somewhat on me, because then the public knew I wasn't this racketeer bookmaker. And that's when I was approached by Jim Libator and Pat Kilkenny from SportsTime Ohio. And Dolan had formed the network, but the network was dark. The only thing on the network was the Indians games.
Right.
The rest of the 24-hour clock, the network was dark. So they said, "Listen, you go do your 5 months. We think that they're making an example of you," which I never did. I was never, ever with the authorities. Never with the authorities, never with the public in denial. Never. I hate that. I hate these guys that are constantly in denial. It's one of my pet peeves. I hate it. Own up to it and be a man.
Get out in
Be
front.
a man.
That's
Get
what
out in
see, I
front.
took the shot, and
I think that's what
part
the
of
public likes too, don't you think?
They said, "Go serve your 5 months. When you get out," which would be, I went in October, I got out at the beginning of March. "When you get out on April 1st, we want to go 24/7 with the network. And we want to consider you to do a talk show to be the face of the network." And so
How lucky is that?
I cannot tell you. Words cannot describe how that helped me serve the 5 months.
Right.
It motivated me. It inspired me. I watched every single sporting event on television. I read. And most guys that are in prison have absolutely no clue what they're going to do when they get out. And that's why a lot of them wind up going back.
Right.
But I went to Morgantown with Federal, and there were no fences, no walls, just signs, "Don't go beyond this point." The grounds were beautiful. There was a lake and creeks and walkways, and a beautiful rec center. I lost 60 pounds in prison. And so I got out, and I met with the bosses at SportsTime Ohio, and They hired me, and I said, but I would like to go on the air and just apologize and tell the story. And I did. My very first show I did, and I was breaking up. I remember I had a very difficult time because I was so emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how the fans forgave me and how they embraced me. And then it became, and one of the bosses is the one that came up with the idea all bets are off, which I didn't like, but he said, and then it kind of grew on me. And then guys would call up and say, man, I can't stand it. The Browns are so bad. I don't know what to do. I've had it. I said, hey, pal, it's not so bad. I spent 5 months in a federal pen.
That's true. What was you said the first night was awful.
First day.
What was it like?
This is a funny story, too. A very, very dear friend of mine who used to be a producer of mine. He's younger than me, but he's about 50 now. Got smart and got out of broadcasting and became a Akron police officer. Now he's a Gold Star detective. And he drove me to Morgantown. And so when you get out, you go in there and they strip search you, and then they lock you. They give you this like pajamas that are too short and these ridiculous little slippers, and they lock you in a cell. They leave you in there for about 2-3 hours. They go to lunch. And then they come back, and then they parade you through the grounds where all the prisoners are, and they just got out of lunch. So they're all over the place, and then you go get your uniform and your shoes and your boots. And then that process is brutal. And then...
Are they yelling at you and stuff? Like in the movies? The other prisoners?
No.
Okay.
You know why? Because they've all been through it. They're sympathetic.
Are they?
Yeah. Because they've been humiliated themselves that way. So they don't. And they were actually quite receptive. I only met a few jerks while I was there. Of course, this was minimum security, too. This was mostly white collar.
White collar crime.
Mostly white collar crime, except for the guys from Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is not a state. Therefore, when you commit a felony, they got to send you somewhere, and Morgantown was the closest. So we had guys that had committed murder and in my living unit. I had a guy in my living unit. He'd been stabbed about 8 times and shot twice, which means if he was stabbed that many times and shot, he was stabbing and shooting back.
Right.
While he was in prison? Or just,
No.
to get to prison. Okay, yeah, I was going to say. Wouldn't make it such a lovely country club then, would it?
No, it would not.
No, but look, anytime your freedom's taken away and you're told what to do, that's the thing. I don't respond well to being told when I go to bed.
It's funny. There were a couple of guys there. Roger Blackwell was the man's name. He was in line. He was a professor at Ohio State University. He was in line to take over, I think, for Gee. I could be mistaken on that. But he was in line to be the president of Ohio State University. And he got caught for in-house trading. And the reason is because he was having an affair with a younger woman, and he had married a younger woman, and his wife had found out about it. I understand. That's the way the story went, and blew the whistle on him. And he goes, and apparently they offered him a plea, 9 months, turned it down, went to trial, lost, and got 6 years.
Well, not to change subject, but you heard about this thing about the celebrities who are paid to get their kids through school.
Yes.
That's right? Now, Felicity Huffman, high-profile wife of Billy Macy, actress, she pleaded, yes, I did wrong. I apologize.
And the other one didn't.
The other one didn't. Lori McLaughlin and her husband, Giannulli, Massimo Giannulli, who's the Italian designer, fighting it, saying not guilty.
Yeah.
Now, if they get jammed up, they're going away for 10, 12 years.
Absolutely. There's another one. Who was that?
And I say, you got to be dumb if they to do 5 months. Well, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Or a couple of years.
Absolutely.
Or unless they high-profile lawyers are going to say, "We'll get you out of this."
As I said, Ray, you go to trial. I found this out. You go to trial against the feds, you lose 85% of the time. Barry Bonds was one of the exceptions.
and so was Jimmy Trafficking.
Right.
Jim
Represented himself.
But here's the thing. One thing, I have a friend of mine who got jammed up. And he was a cop. and he wound up getting jabbed up. But he said, these feds, he said, they ain't never letting you go. They don't ever let you go because they're gonna bleed you out one way or the other. They're gonna let you. They never let you go.
That's why
But here's what he
so
told me.
thorough. It's unbelievable.
And Bruce, what he told me, he said, always, he said, if you ever, he said, God forbid you ever have to, but if you ever think you get up with the feds, he said, always remember, they know the answers before they ask the questions.
Yes, and
They
that's
already have
why
the answers before they
it's
ask
so
questions. Don't lie to 'em.
disturbing
Don't
what
lie.
has happened in our country these last 2 years with all these investigations. It's not the Bureau that's corrupt. It's just a select amount of the Bureau heads that were revealed. But the base of the Bureau, those are good
Yeah, of
people.
course.
They are wonderful law enforcement
Hard-working people.
There was another guy, what was that first survivor's name? The show Survivor.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
the
yeah.
On the
heck?
show, Survivor?
Yeah, what
The
the
guy-
heck
the guy,
was
yeah.
his name? Anyway,
He got jammed up.
he didn't pay his taxes for his winnings.
Man.
So they offered him 9 months. He turned it down, went to trial, lost. He got 5 years.
Yeah, but that's I said. Always remember, anybody listen out
Well,
there.
they think they're
the feds
invincible.
get you. They know the answers
they're
before they ask
invincible.
the questions.
Well, again,
All right, let me ask you this. Finish this sentence. The Cleveland sports fan is blank.
I want to say loyal. That's the first thing because I think of the Browns. But it doesn't apply to the fans. The base of the Indians fans are extremely loyal. But there's just not enough of them. It's a football state. It's a football town. Although Cincinnati is a baseball town.
Totally.
And it's a great
Absolutely.
baseball town.
Absolutely.
Not as great as St. Louis, but
very
no
few.
city is.
Well, I was gonna say Chicago. Outside New York, man. Yeah, outside New York, Chi-Town, maybe sports fans.
New York, Chicago, L.A. It's always been a Dodger town,
It
and
always has.
Lakers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Clippers have been the stepchild forever, but now
Right.
now they've been Fredo.
Right.
They're Fredo. Now they're moving up.
Right.
Are they
But St. Louis is a great city.
angry? Do they drink the Kool-Aid? Do they, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I have said for years the Browns fans are the best fans of any team in any sport, period, because they have been loyal, passionate, devoted, and in love with this team who has been the biggest joke of a franchise perhaps in the history of sports.
for decades.
Yes, so I will argue that with anyone. And now, of course,
What should a
it's
Browns
unbelievable.
fan be? Cautiously optimistic? Fired
Well,
up? What should a Browns
they're
fan
more
be?
than cautiously optimistic
should they
now
be?
what Dorsey's done. They're just they've already got us in the Super Bowl.
That's what
which
I'm
is
saying.
a little premature.
Right. So what should they be?
Vegas has got the over/under at 9.
Do you agree?
For wins. I do agree because the schedule's leaked out.
Yeah. We
and
find out
it's
tomorrow.
a very brutal schedule.
And a lot of 4 o'clocks, it looks like.
Yeah,
a lot of night games.
5 primetime games, which is the maximum you can be in.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There's another thing I was going to say. But how about this? Tell me if I'm wrong, Bruce. That the head coaching job at the Browns, when they were looking for the coach, was the most prized possession in sports.
Yeah.
When's that happen? Since Hoover was president, it ain't happened.
Yeah.
And
Been a little
since
while.
Hoover was president.
Been a
No,
little
seriously.
while.
But it really was. How about was that it was the most sought out job in sports was the Cleveland Brown head coach.
Yeah.
Now, bringing Arians back, a smart choice. I said the guys, I thought it was a good choice.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike McCarthy would have been a good choice too, but Arians did it. Well, why not go with him?
Yeah, I like Kitchens a lot. My only
Oh, was it
reservation.
Kitchen? Was it
Yeah,
Kitchen? I'm sorry. I'm
Smart.
Kitchens.
My only reservation about Kitchens is that he's never been a head coach. So he's now going to have to visit every single room, not just the quarterback room and the receiver room. He's got to go to all those defensive rooms and those specialty team rooms. And so that responsibility, and he's still going to call the plays. So and
It's a lot.
It's a lot of responsibility. Now, there's about 9 other coaches in the NFL that do call their own plays, and that's fine. I think Kitchens can handle. But that's my only concern and reservation about him.
Would you be? I'm going to switch sports on you. Would you be surprised if the Knicks got the #1 pick?
Not at all.
Do you think it's a little fishy?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. I think it was fishy when we got LeBron, which
I do
was
too.
a good thing.
I do too.
But yes, I definitely do. Look at when Stern was the commissioner, there was a press conference, and he was asked by a reporter a legitimate question about the officiating in the NBA, which is a complete joke. Now, we talked about judging and boxing,
Although,
gymnastics, and
would you
that's different. This
not
is
agree?
The officiating in the NBA.
They do the flip. They do.
It's the
It-
hardest
it's
sport to
disgraceful.
officiate, though, wouldn't you say?
Well,
Of all the sports?
I officiated basketball. It's a difficult sport to officiate, but
be consistent, though.
Look, in the NBA, they allow molestation in the paint.
Sometimes, yes.
And then if they touch you with your pinky on the top of the key, that's a
Right,
foul.
that's right.
That's
You better do this.
ridiculous. Show me that in the rule book.
And correct me if
You
I'm
can't.
wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. When they talk about the Jordan rules, there was the Jordan rules.
Yes,
Because
no question.
David Stern made no point. Michael was the guy. When you said how long David Stern was the commissioner?
Oh, God. Long time, Ray.
Well,
Decades.
it was a long time, but I mean,
Decades.
minus the years that Michael was the actual.
From the 80s to the 2000s.
no, but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Minus the years that Michael was the actual commissioner, because he commissioned. He
ran the
told
league.
Stern what to do. His agent told Stern, "This is what we're going to do."
Well, at this press conference, Stearns asked this question about the officiating. He goes, "Oh, what a ridiculously stupid question." A month later, the Donaghy scandal broke.
That's right.
And then Stern was pale as Casper the Ghost.
Right.
I mean, come on. So, yeah, I won't be surprised if New York gets that pick.
Well,
Crazy.
It's needed. You know, the market's needed. We need the New York because
No,
it's
it is.
Well,
It's
because
true.
they ain't been relevant since Hoover. Again, since Hoover was president.
Well, because right now in the NBA, I was telling Fred this the other day, if you're a northern team and you're not New York, Boston, Chicago, Philly maybe, nobody wants to go there.
No.
The free agents don't want to go to the northern teams.
Well, how's this in comparing the sports? The four major sports. Before the start of the baseball season, you can make a case for 10, 11 teams that could win the World Series, maybe more. Before the start of the NFL season, you can make a case for a half a dozen.
Oh, easy.
Before the NHL season, you can make a case for 20-some teams. But in the NBA, one,
Yeah.
maybe two when LeBron was with Cleveland. That's it. And even this year, Golden State lost a lot of games because they became lethargic, in my opinion.
Exactly.
And now they're going to turn the switch
Turn
on.
it up. That's right.
And they're going to win it again. I mean, Milwaukee, but and so there's no intrigue to the season, in my opinion, in the NBA.
That's
Right.
Not
It's a
anymore.
waste.
Not
It's
anymore.
almost a waste.
Not
To tell you
anymore.
the truth.
But let me say, Bruce. Now, people always ask me, like, always, who was the hardest guy for you to fight? Who was the hardest fighter you ever fought? Or what was the biggest celebrity you ever met? And things like that, right? The hardest guy for you to interview.
That's easy. Jesse Orozco,
There.
former relief pitcher in
That's
the
right.
majors, who, when I had
Was you with the Baltimore, right?
well, he was with
And the
us
Indians for a
when
long
he
time.
came to the Indians.
God, he pitched almost
about
every day, didn't he?
Ray, he pitched for just about every major league team just to get a paycheck. So he comes to the Indians. I had replaced Franklin, and we were doing the show from the Viscount Suites. We were still training in Tucson. And he comes on, and I said, "Gee, Jesse, great opportunity for you. The Indians signed you. You can prolong." He was toward the end of his career, and prolong your career, and you can help. And he said, "Yeah."
Was there a language barrier?
And then then another question. Yeah, no, yeah, yeah. It was just brutal, and he was just such a jerk. So down deep, I wanted to see him. I hate to say because I love the Indians. I just wanted to see him get bombed every time he went out there. Just bombed.
Yeah.
Now, Bruce, what if you about these guys? And I've said this. I've said this numerous times. When you interview a lot of these ballers, right, whoever they may be, and they get smart with you, and they got a little froggy with you. I say, hey, man, how about if I come over and kick your ass and smack the shit out of you?
Can't do that.
No, you can't do. How about this? But then the only thing you could do is don't interview the guy. Who cares about? How about Russell Westbrook? Guy asks a question. Next question.
Well,
Next question. Guess what? There ain't no next question. I don't want to interview him. Walk away. Everybody should walk away from the guy.
I
It
know
won't
what you're
happen,
saying.
but they should.
can't.
I
I'll tell you.
have an advantage, Ray, because and that rarely happens to me, especially now this portion of my career. But I have an advantage because of my talk show. That's a platform. I can go on the air and tell the story. What have I got to lose?
That's right.
I'm going to be 69 years old on May 1st. What have I got to lose?
That's right.
I can go on the air and tell the fans what a jerk this guy is. But let me also tell you, Sher, you said that's the worst.
I was going to say
now
the best. That's
Charlie Finley.
That makes sense.
Charlie Finley.
Oh yeah, yes.
Now for the younger people,
They
out
won't
there,
know.
They don't know who Charlie Finley is. Charlie Finley was the owner of the Kansas City Athletics.
Thank you for going there.
And then they moved to Oakland, and he won 5 divisional championships in a row and 3 world championships in a row. And that's the best defensive baseball team I have ever seen. And I'm not just talking about the pitching. But he came to Cleveland, and he was originally, from Chicago, LaPorte, Indiana.
Oh, I didn't know.
Right outside.
Well, let's clarify. That's from 72 to 74. 72 to 73, 74.
Reggie Jackson,
that's
the
correct.
whole
Oakland
group.
Raiders.
That's
Oakland,
correct.
Oakland.
A's, yeah.
Oakland
he
Athletics.
Yes.
Those 3 years,
Yes,
they were
very
great,
good.
man.
He beat the Reds in 72 in 7 games. He beat the Mets in 73, which was that was a very odd year. That was in 7 games, and he was down 3 games to 1.
And then he beat the Reds again, didn't he?
And
74?
no, 75 and 76, the Reds beat the Yankees at Boston and the Yankees.
But I'm 74.
In 74, it was the L.A. Dodgers.
Oh.
In 5 games when they had Garvey and
Sure.
Yeager and that crew.
Yeah.
But so Finley was coming. There used to be the Wahoo Club Luncheon, which they'd get a guest speaker from the opposing team that was coming in to play the Indians, and they'd get an MC and usually one of us from the Cleveland media. So I was chosen to be the MC that day, and Finley was going to be the guest speaker. So I contacted Finley, and I told him, and I somehow was able to get through to him. It's a miracle to this day how I could. And I told him, I said, I just arrived in Cleveland. I'm originally from Chicago. I'm a big admirer of yours, and I do a talk show. And I'm going to be emceeing you at the luncheon, and after the luncheon, I would love to have you come on my talk show. So he said, you're the only one in Cleveland I'm going to grant this to. So we do the lunch. Afterward, he comes to my show. It was an afternoon drive. And he sits in on my show. And he stayed for like 2.5 hours. It was like a 4-hour talk show. And he stayed for like 2.5 hours. It was unbelievable. He's taking calls from the public. They're calling up and they're saying, you bum, you're ruining baseball, and you're cheap, and you don't do this. And he says, hey, let me tell you something. I won 5 divisional crowns in a row, 3 world championships in a row, and only one other team in the history of baseball can say that. And that was the Yankees, of course.
That's right.
So he was absolutely fantastic. Didn't grant an interview to anybody else in the Cleveland market that day that he was in town. And then that night, he invited me into his booth. They always would give the opposing execs a booth. A loge. So I went into his loge and I was watching the game with him against the Indians. And then afterward, he invited me to the hotel, and we went to the hotel, and all of his Red Schoendienst was on his coaching staff, and Jack McKeon was the manager, and they all were at this table with Finley, and it was like they were ordered to be there, and he was such a dictator, and I, we're all having a couple of cold ones. And then all of a sudden, this young woman walks in, and beautiful young woman goes right over to Finley, starts hugging him and everything. And I said, well, time for me to go home. It's about that time. So.
I said Charlie Finley was probably the Bill Veeck of the new generation.
Great analogy, Ray, with the colored uniforms, white shoes, the gaudy green and gold.
And for those who don't know, Bill Veeck was in the 30s and 40s when he did the thing with Eddie.
Eddie Goodell.
Eddie Goodell.
Eddie Goodell with St. Louis.
And we just watched Disco Demolition Night, by the way. We just watched it on the computer for the young guys.
Oh my God!
The other day, who was in charge of that too? His son.
He
was signed off on
in
it.
Chicago, the exploding scoreboard.
Yeah,
there you go. That's what anybody knows. That said, Bill Veeck was the guy who just took baseball to another level, made it an entertainment event when he went to see a game.
And was the owner of the Indians the last time we won the World Series, 1948.
Right.
There you go.
What some of the best TV and radio is when you get fired up. What grinds your gears these days? What is it? A caller? Is it a subject? Is it the shadiness of professional sports? What bugs you the most?
All of the above.
All those things?
All of the above.
So you could go off right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm, I pride myself in my spontaneity, and anything could trigger me. I could be in a caller segment. It could be a story, like you say. Like for instance, when I go to work today, we'll have a pre-show meeting, and if there's a story that strikes my attention, then I know that I will be, erupting once I get on the air. Yeah, and it may be, like you said, all of the above. The condition of professional sports, the corruptness of it now.
Well, but the thing that gets me is just what I was talking about before. These ballers, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to. Hey, they have an obligation. You're giving them, but don't interview them. They shouldn't write about these guys. I mean, the only way you hurt them is by not interviewing them.
Well,
but
you got bosses too, though.
I
who
understand.
one of the toughest teams to cover was, and you were there, the '95 Indians. Remember how
with
great
Bell.
they were. So you go in,
Lofton
Bell's
was-
on the team. Lofton is Lofton. Eddie Murray wouldn't talk to anybody.
Right.
Manny Ramirez pretended like he didn't talk English, even though he grew up in New York.
Right.
Baerga couldn't talk English. Everybody goes to Tommy. We all just crowded around
Right.
Tomy's locker
Right.
and he was an a-hole one time, and then Andrea yelled at him.
Yeah.
And, and then he was nice the rest of the way, or Nagy, or some of those guys, Sorrento.
Right.
But that was a tough team to cover.
Here's one. When I was doing the TV games with Tate, we were in New York, and Reggie Jackson was with the Yankees, and he the director wanted me to get an interview with Jackson. So I go down. The Yankees are taking BP. Jackson comes out of the dugout. He's got his bats. He's walking toward the cage, and I introduced myself. And then we had these ridiculously gaudy Channel 43
The Blazers.
jackets. The Blazers.
Yeah.
Right. So he knew. I introduced myself as one of the TV guys, and I said, "Can I get an interview?" And he's just walking, doesn't even acknowledge me, just like you're talking, Ray. So he takes his BP, he gets done, he's walking back to the dugout. I'm following him and everything, and he says, and so he sits down. I sit next to him, and microphone, the lights go on, and I'm really thinking, oh man, this is going to be something. And I said, Reggie, whatever question I asked him, and he says, "Well, Bruce, let me tell you," and he was one of the greatest interviews I've ever done in my career. He's just opening up, calling me by my name. I never met him before. He was great. We get done with the interview. The mics go off. I said, "Thanks a lot, Reggie." He doesn't say a word. He stands up and he struts away like this. He knew when those lights were on.
I'll take that every time, though. Won't
I
you?
agree.
Well,
I
right.
totally
I
agree.
mean, but you always hear that about athletes who know when the lights are on.
Yeah.
They know when the lights, and because they're jerk offs when the lights are off. But like you said, you don't need them when the lights are off. You don't need them then. You just But a lot of these guys, But look, a lot of them need ass whippings. A lot of them need ass whippings. And I always
That's where
say
he
that.
comes in.
No, I said a lot of guys gonna need ass kickings, and I'll tell you what. I'm waiting for that time. And one guy says, the guy starts going off on him, and he says, next question. And he says, jerk off. Answer the one I just told you. I just asked you. And the athlete gets in his face and he gets dropped. Boom, crack him, drop on spot. You get more publicity from that. You say you can't do that. Why not? If they want to get froggy with you, come after you, drop him on the spot. That guy will get more publicity than the best thing ever happened for that paper.
Here's an example of a guy I admire a lot, Corey Kluber of the Indians, who, as you know, is a very laid-back individual, not effervescent personality, and but he'll, even when he loses, and he just lost again, he will never deny the media a post-game interview.
Beautiful.
So I admire and respect
pro.
him
That's what a grown-up
tremendously.
does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. All right, you ready? Lightning round.
Uh-oh.
Before we go.
I didn't know. It's
I
a new one
just
for
came
me.
up-
Uh-oh,
I
Ray,
gotta talk sports
Hold my
with the guy.
hand,
This is
Ray.
my-
I need
my
help
shot.
here.
These are yes or no questions. The Browns win the division.
Yes.
The Indians win the division.
Yes.
Ohio State wins the Big Ten.
No.
Who does?
It could be Penn State. It could be Wisconsin. It could be Michigan.
M. Starts with an M. Indians' biggest concern for you is? That's not a yes or no.
The scoring runs, not taking advantage of the tremendous pitching that we do possess, even though they've been shaky lately, the starters.
Do the Cavs get it right with their draft pick and get?
Yes, they
Yeah.
can't go wrong.
Okay.
They can't go wrong because they're going to pick the worst they're going to get is sixth. That was determined yesterday, or a couple days ago. So yeah, they're fine. They're going to get a real good player. I was wrong about the Cavs. I hope I was wrong about the Cavs when Gilbert came out and said we may be only 2 or 3 years away from getting back to contention for the Eastern Conference. I really questioned it, but now I don't. I like the nucleus of the Cavs. I really do.
Will Kevin Love be there for the whole season?
He'll be there. I don't know if he's going to play. He gets hurt so much.
He won't get traded.
No, I don't see him getting
No, he's
traded.
gotta be the center
If
field.
anybody double T,
Because he's expiring,
yeah.
expiring contract.
I think Thompson could be dealt.
Yeah.
Smith is gone. That's a nice contract because other teams will use that to their benefit with the cap.
Biggest concern for the Browns. Mayfield still good? Are you sold on Mayfield?
I am. However, my experience tells me to be cautious. He was a rookie, and they're going to adjust to him. My biggest concern is, I think that's a good offensive line. Every aspect of the team what Dorsey's done is
better.
just magnificent. Gil Brandt never did anything like what Dorsey has done in constructing this team. But I am cautiously optimistic, like you alluded to earlier, Mike. I really, the fans have got us in the Super Bowl. We haven't even played a game yet.
So it sounds like if it's not on the field, maybe their concern is the coach?
Well, I said earlier, he's never had this kind of overall overseeing responsibility. So, and he's going to call the plays.
Yeah.
So we'll see how he handles that. And the first 4 games, if that's accurate, what I heard about the schedule, are brutal.
Yeah.
May I ask, they still got to get a DB, right? Or do you think that they just traded for it? They got the one DB now.
They got a
rid of
safety.
Peppers. And they got the safety. But
Could
they
use some
Yeah,
cornerbacks.
I think that. Yeah,
Could use
and
some
again,
linebackers.
It wouldn't surprise me if he trades up into the first round to get a cornerback,
I was gonna say,
another one to complement Ward
Hines-
because Ward
Ward,
had the
Hines-
concussions.
Hines Ward.
He had the
Denzel Ward, yeah.
he had the concussions, and that's always a concern.
But for years, it's funny you said it when they picked Ward. I mean, went, oh my God!
I
And
didn't
said-
like the Mayfield
I
pick,
said-
let alone the Ward pick.
When they picked
Sorry.
Ward, I said we gotta have a shutdown. That's the one thing we had no shutdown DB forever.
Right.
There were people running on, just going along on us and killing us.
Right.
So he became obviously
became
an all-star
that guy.
Right.
I mean,
became that
when they got everyone thought last year they
Hayden.
should have got to complement Garrett on the one side. It should be Chubb, not what was that guy?
Right.
No, I
for
know.
the other
The
defensive
defensive lineman,
defensive
Chubb.
lineman, Chubb. So we'd
Yes.
have bookends, and then
Yes.
they took Mayfield, of course, and then they took Ward.
Yeah. Now
And-
they
and-
made this deal to get Olivier Vernon and Richardson, and they're loaded. I love that defensive line, but
interesting.
I'm cautiously optimistic about them. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch and cover.
Look, they were competitive in every game.
Yes.
Bruce. That was the one thing. Even games they lost
Yes.
until finally, who was the coach? I can't think of his name now. The one before Kitchens took over.
Hugh Jackson?
Yeah, Jackson.
No, okay, my bad. The one before him, the one
Oh, Greg Williams.
Greg Williams. Mayfield comes on. He wins the game for him late when they finally put him in one game. He benches him the next game. He didn't start him the next game. The game they won, was the 4th or 5th game. He brings them back. They win the game
Against the Jets.
against the Jets.
Yeah.
That was New York. I was to say the Giants. I thought wins the game. What does Greg Williams do? He sets him for the next game. He got momentum. You got the fans are behind him. So what are you doing? Well, you can't do that. You got to go. Games, football more than any other sport is about momentum.
Veteran coaches love their veteran players, don't they? They're like their safety blankets.
You got to go with the hot hand. That's the first, right? He set him, and what happened? And they lost. And then, of course, everything else is taken over. But my point being is, they're fun to watch. Last year. They were in They were in every game at the end.
Yeah.
Even if they lost, they were in every game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What time's the show on today, Bruce? Is it on today?
Yeah. 4:30 to 6:30 today, and
On Fox Sports Ohio?
on SportsTime Ohio.
SportsTime Ohio?
Right.
Yep.
Well, look, we gotta have you back. We gotta have you back.
Well,
There's
he
too
likes to
much.
play golf here, don't you?
Oh, This place is.
This
one
I'm
of
gonna
my
let him do the
favorites.
Avalon
Oh, you
commercial
know,
right
hey,
now.
there you go.
I don't even need to read it.
That
Just
leads
tell him
right
about
into it. That
Avalon.
leads right into it.
When you
Oh.
got for the first time, you came last year for the first time. Was that the first time?
A couple
last
years ago.
Okay.
Right. It was, and I played Squaw Creek, which I love. And that setting, we had lunch, and that setting for lunch with that pool is just gorgeous. Let alone when they get done with this pool here.
Right.
Oh my goodness, it's Romanesque. It's so beautiful. But this golf course, Avalon Lakes, is, in my opinion, has 5 or 6 holes, any one of which could be the signature hole of this course. And I tell people that, and I've been here several times since I first came, and I was here many, many, many years ago, didn't even remember it, but there are so many great holes. 8 and 9 are just awesome holes. I think 11 is one of the most unique holes I've ever played in my life. It's a par 5 over that water.
It's a meat grinder.
And I played here last year with Jimmy Hanlon, the pro from our network, and he put it in the water.
Did
And
he?
Yes. He
Bit
took
off a little too much.
Took a 7 on that hole, absolutely. So I just can't say enough about Avalon Lakes. It's fantastic. I want to play Buell Park. I haven't played there yet.
We can go. It's phenomenal.
Now, Bruce, would you come? Do you you stayed overnight before?
Yes.
Did you
Last night,
Did you get
right?
the honeymoon?
Yes,
did you get the
including
honeymoon
it.
suite?
Yeah, I
given
did
the
one
honeymoon
time.
suite, is that what-
first time.
The honeymoon suite. Isn't that leads right into our. What do we have a honeymoon
I
package
know,
or
I
something?
know.
Oh my goodness! And the suites are so
spectacular.
just
Yeah.
spectacular.
The rooms are
Yeah,
terrific.
it's hard, just beautiful.
If you haven't been to the hotel, it's different because it's not the same room over and over like with some of the
Right.
chain hotels.
Right.
Every room's a little bit different. It's phenomenal.
And Bruce, since you're not from here, as I said, growing up, when I was growing up, this was the only joint around.
right.
And this was like a trek to come out from the side. I mean, you come all
Yeah.
the way out here because the airport was the only other thing out here.
Right.
But Avalon was the only thing, but it was a trek to get out there. But it was like going out to the country, going out to another.
Yeah.
You going to a.
Well,
to a
it's such an
destination.
attractive package for golfers because they can shuttle you to Buell or shuttle you to Squaw Creek, and everything is made so easy. And now with this new pool going in and the spa and by the way, the state of the art golf facility with the putting and the screens,
The simulators
the
and all that?
simulators. Oh my! It's just unbelievable. What a complex this is.
Well,
It's
you got to
really-
come back, okay?
I will
Come back this
definitely
summer?
come back.
Very
Thank
good.
you very
So
much.
is that the
That's it.
commercial?
That's
the
all we
commercial
gotta
for So that's the Avalon. Yes,
blow
the
the pressure
Avalon
off.
Inn. Come get the
Right.
honeymoon suite. Bruce
Right.
has had it before.
Hey, Ray. Really
Thank you.
an
My
honor
pleasure.
and a privilege
That's my pleasure.
to
Thank
be
you.
on your
That's
show.
very
And
kind of
my-
you.
Same for me.
I appreciate
Same
it,
for
man.
me.
I,
Thank
it
you.
is one.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed the show. Best show I've enjoyed just listening because I'm a sports guy and I love to hear the stories. It's all about the stories. Mike, what do I always say? I said all about the stories.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what do you got? All you got is the stories.
Right.
I tell my kids all the time, forget about what It's all about the stories because that's what they're going to remember you for. The
That's
stories,
right.
right?
That's right. All right, wrap it up.
Well, all
then.
right. Well, then I guess welcome our very special guest, Bruce Drennan, the Irish Drennan. The Irish Drennan,
This is
right?
the Irish one?
That's the A. What was the EN?
A.N.
AN is
Right.
that's the Irish. EN's the German. So this is that
Right.
Bruce, the Irish Drennan. But anyhow, Bruce, I can't thank you enough, Mike. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
getting
Ray.
Bruce,
Thank
and
you.
I can't
It's
thank
an
you
honor.
enough and everybody. And look, if you listened to the show and enjoyed it, please tell your friends. We'll be back again next Tuesday for another round. But this weekend coming up.
Yeah, where are you going?
Because I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I'm going out to L.A. I'll be in the studio, but on Fox Sports
One.
Saturday. No,
The
this
real
is
one?
Fox.
This is on
Fox
the
Network. We
mothership.
just did FS1
Okay.
last weekend. Well, let me talk a few minutes about that. We were in the hometown, Minnesota, at the Armory again.
Okay.
I was hearing the voices of George Mikan. I was just getting the ghost of George
Oh, yeah.
the Armory, fabulous facility. Joe Louis fought there. Ray Robinson defended his title there. I mean, a lot of great fights through the years were there at the Armory. Armory's been around from the 20s or early 30s. So, but again, you get there. It's just a great facility, man. You get, like I said, you hear the voice of George Mikan, from there.
That's cool.
But anyhow, the fights were great fights, but the main event was a bit of a little disappointing. The hometown boy Caleb Truax fought Peter Quillen. It was an elimination bout for a fight for the super middleweight title, and first round they butted heads. Boom, cut Caleb Truax to them, split him bad, blood spurting out. But between rounds, But I think, well, and I said on the air, I said, well, they're going to get a chance. The cutman's going to get a chance to earn his money. They didn't do anything. They're getting towels.
That was it?
That blood squirting out. I go, where's the adrenaline to stop the bleeding?
Yeah.
Then you get to coagulate. Then you get the grease. The first thing you got to put the adrenaline to stop it. Then the coagulate to keep it down. They did nothing. Second round, they went out there in the middle. They stopped the Dr. Kim and said, no, I mean, it's too bad. It was all cut down to the bone. So it was a very disappointing main event. But the two fights, the semifinal was Sergey Deryan. I'm gonna say this slow. Deryanvenchenko
Yeah.
fought Jack Kukai. Jack's from actually was born in South America, but fights out of Germany. Sergey, as I say, Sergey is Russians fighting out of California now, and out of New York now, out of Brooklyn, and great fight, entertaining as hell, and it went 10 rounds, and so the other fights were good fights. The main event was a bit of a bust, unfortunately, but the fights were great. This weekend, out of Carson, California, will be Danny Garcia, former junior welterweight champ, fighting Adrian Granados, tough Mexican guy, always gives it all, gives action-packed guy. So, Danny Garcia is the counter puncher, big puncher though, but he likes to counter punch. Adrian Granados is a, come forward, both hands, punches and bunches type of guy. Should make for a great fight. Fox Sport on Fox Network. Now Fox Sports, Fox, 8 o'clock, prime time, Saturday night, and watch the fight on Fox, and I'll be in the studio, and we'll talk about that fight next week. Okay, until then, man, this has been a long show. My bride's been calling me twice. Now, where you at? Go get the dog. I gotta go get the dog. Anyhow, that's what I'm at. She's texting me, where you at? Get the dog. So until next time, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time. But until then, take care of each other, love each other. Good night, God bless.